If you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. Let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job by subscribing to the channel. Plus, you'll get notified when I have new videos coming out. And finally, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, give it a like. Just click on that thumbs up, and that way YouTube knows that you like it, and they'll pass it along to other people that might enjoy my content as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you again. Let's get started.
Today, we will get to know the basics of urban gardening. Ang episode na ito ay para sa mga gustong magsimula o magpatuloy sa pagtatanim ng gulay sa sarili ninyo mga tahanan. Let's start our journey to becoming urban farmers. Together with us is the founder of Manila Grow Kits, a company specializing in modern-day organic grow kits. He is also an ATI-accredited learning site cooperator of Ragsak Family Farm. Let's welcome Mr. Carlos Sumawang.
Hi, Beth.
So can you tell us, how did you start your planting journey?
Alright, it was very difficult for me at first. The family business has been around for almost 20 years. Nasa agrikultura talaga kami. We're actually producing organic fertilizers. But at first, yung love ko talaga is not really with agriculture. It was with arts, nasa creatives talaga ako. And lo and behold, parang na-invite ako ng father ko to work with a family business. So that's when I started. Una, nagtipla muna ako ng kape para sa tatay ko. And then eventually, wala na akong naging choice but to really embrace agriculture since that's our family business.
Okay.
And I can vividly remember it back in 2015 or 16 when I really tried to parang love or started loving agriculture. I can vividly remember, nag-try akong magpalaki ng basil at that time.
Okay.
And during that point, wala pa akong masyadong pagmamahal sa agrikultura, which is funny. And then, nung nakita kong nag-sprout or lumabas yung basil, that's when I decided and I said to myself na ang laki ng impact ng agrikultura. Because coming from someone na wala masyadong pagmamahal sa agrikultura and you see something sprout from a seed, it will really change your perspective na parang, I'm really capable of growing something. So, it started that way. So, medyo bumpy at first kasi parang hindi mo pa alam kung paano mo gagamitin yung agrikultura as a tool. At that point, parang masaya lang na nakapagpalaki ako. But eventually, when we started offering organic grow kits, doon namin nakitaan ng value na ang daming pwedeng maitulong or maitulong ng agrikultura, not just dun sa mga gustong magtanim, but actually dun sa mga walang idea kung paano mag-start magtanim.
Okay.
So it started medyo mahirap for me, but eventually once you parang start exercising it, growing more plants, that's when you start falling in love with agriculture, I guess.
I see. So parang siyang muscle, kailangan mo siyang i-exercise.
Yes, parang muscle. So parang ka nag-workout every time when you start planting.
I see. So, ito yung gusto malaman ng mga viewers natin. Mahirap ba mag-urban garden?
You know what's funny? Because when we started Manila Grow Kits, ang daming nagsasabi sa amin na, you know what, ang hirap, nakapatay ako. Ikaw, I think, nasabi mo na sa akin kanina, nakapatay ka ng munggo. And it's usually the case for most people who wants to start farming because meron silang bad experience anong bata sila in growing. And immediately ang sasabihin nila, I have a block thumb. Pero we really don't believe in that. Ang lagi lang namin sinasabi sa Manila Grow Kits is you really have to have the right resources, the right knowledge, and really guidance on how to start your planting journey. So to answer your question directly, hindi mahirap magpalaki or magtanim ng ornamental plants or ng sarili nyong pagkain. It's just having the right materials. It's just having the right information and guidance. And that's why we are here for this first episode of AgriTalk for you guys is, of course, to teach you how to start growing your own food. We will be talking lengthily about paano ka mag-harvest ng buto since yung setting natin ngayon is pandemic. So tuturuan namin kayo on how to start planting your food, kung ano yung mga resources na meron kayo sa loob ng bahay ninyo. So yeah, I'm very excited and thank you very much for having us and hope marami kayong matutunan for this first episode of AgriTalk. ultimately, growing our own food is possible. We can even make it a part of our lifestyle. Do you want to know how? Tara, let's agri-talk. To start, urban agriculture isn't only about food production, but also needs to address generational differences on our ideas on farming. And before we start teaching you guys on how to start growing your own food, I think it's really important na malaman niyo yung rason kung bakit importanteng mag-start kayo magtanim ng mga sarili ninyong pagkain. Back in 2016, we conducted one simple survey. Nagtanong kami ng 100 respondents na nakatira sa Metro Manila ng one simple question. What do you think or how do you feel about farming and gardening in general? And while we were waiting for the results, nakakala namin ang ganda ng perspective ng mga kabataan towards farming. Pero nung nakuha namin yung resulta, almost 80% of those living in Metro Manila, na kaedad natin, actually has negative connotation about farming. Ang sabi pa ng iba, bakit pa ako kailangan magtanim? Pwede naman akong bumili sa grocery or ayoko magtanim kasi ang dumi lang sa kamay. And pag nilagyan na natin ng lapat ng average age of our Filipino farmers, back in 2014, it was 57 na. So kung tama yung math ko, 10 to 20 years from now, karamihan sa mga farmers natin na magre-retire. And kung karamihan sa mga kabataan ngayon doesn't want to start growing their own food, it will be very difficult for us, lalo na ngayon na may pandemic, para makakuha tayo ng nutrition para sa ating pamilya or para sa sarili natin. And that's the very reason why I'm here, to really help you start growing your own food and hopefully, mag-umpisa kayo. And alam kong excited na kayo to start your planting journey, and that's why I'm here, to make it easy for you guys to understand the 6 basic requirements to start growing your own food. During this episode, pag-uusapan natin yung space, seed, soil, sunlight, water, and container. Kaya tara, pag-usapan natin. And to start your planting journey, it's really important for you guys to have a space. And usually yung mga tanong sa amin, masyadong maliit yung condominium ko, baka wala akong pwedeng itanim. Ang totoo niyan, a big space or a small space doesn't matter because marami tayong pwedeng gawin to start growing something within the space that you have. And ang opportunity natin or ang consideration natin when we're trying to look for a space, una sa lahat is try to look for a space outside your homes or your condominiums. Kung nasa condominium kayo, you can actually explore kung meron kayong balkonahe or balcony. Pwede na natin explore yung rooftop, or some actually explore yung fire exits, pero medyo delikado pagka fire exits. The idea behind looking for a space outside our homes or sa mga bahay natin is we want to try to mimic how plants grow in a natural setting. And usually, pag nagpapalaki naman tayo sa farm ng halaman, ng pangkain, o kaya ng ornamentals, usually wala namang bubong, or usually wala namang walls. So yung first consideration natin is really try to mimic how they grow in their natural habitat. Pero of course, since urban setting tayo, and this is urban gardening, I'd like to believe that 90% of you guys are actually living inside a condominium. So it's kind of tricky to really look for a space na walang bubong or walang pader. So say for example, if you're living in a condominium, ang best bet talaga natin, again, is balcony. So kung wala kayong balkonahe, of course, I'm sure meron kayong bintana. And that is the best friend for your plants. So kung nakatira kayo sa condominium, ang hahanapin nyo is actually windowsill, kung saan merong pumapasok na araw. And then, second, yung crops na pwede natin palakihin on different settings, say for example in a condominium, usually yung condominium natin, if your condominium has full sun, which I will be discussing with you guys later, you are blessed because mas marami kayong plants na pwedeng palakihin. But most often than not, pagka condominium yung space nyo medyo mas tight, you're actually restricted in growing smaller plants, like say for example, a basil, like the one in front of me, or other herbs, like say for example, tarragon, chives, and whatnots. Yung mga malalaking halaman katulad ng eggplants, tomatoes, those will be very difficult for you to grow, lalo na in a condominium setting kasi medyo mas malalaki sila. So again, to recap, when we're trying to look for a space, look for a space outside. Pero kung wala, try to look for a space kung saan merong pumapasok na araw. So that's our first consideration in order for you to start your planting journey. So, if ever may mga leftover kayong vegetables, ang sample pala na gagamitin ngayon is tomato because I think it is one of the easiest para at least mabilis sa demo. But you can actually do this dun sa mga leftover ninyong vegetables. If for example, okra, you have eggplants, and it's actually easy for you to harvest seeds from your leftover vegetables. So in this case, in tomato, ang gagawin mo lang is hatiin mo or if ever na may natira, what you need is a spoon. Ang gagawin mo is just to scoop the seeds out. Alright, so hindi ko na siya lalahatin para at least hindi tayo matagal. And then, what you'd be needing is a tissue. Ang gawin mo lang is using the spoon, you push around the seeds. Bakit natin siya ang padaanin sa tissue? Because napapansin nyo, and I'm sure familiar kayo, sa buto ng tomatoes, medyo may slime siya dun sa gilid or dun sa nakapalibot sa buto. Ang idea, kaya natin siya pinapadaan sa tissue is matanggal yung slime na yun. Why? Because when you store your seeds na meron siyang slime, it will actually shorten yung shelf life ng buto ninyo. So para mas tumagal yung buto ninyo, what you want to do is to push it around. Okay, example tayo ng isa. Push it around hanggang sa maging malinis yung buto. So once na natanggal na yung film, there you go. Once na natanggal yung film, you can actually let it air dry for, say for example, 24 hours. Pagka nakita mo tuyong-tuyo na siya, it's the perfect time for you to store them kahit sa mga ziplocs. Kung hindi man sa ziplocs, kung meron kayong container, basta ang importante is hindi siya or hindi mag-moist yung seed natin. So, sample ko ngayon is tomato, but you can actually do this again with eggplant, with okra, with ampalaya. I think pwede nyo rin siyang gamitin. And kung may slimy covering yung seeds natin, what you can do is use a paper towel and then just push it around hanggang sa matanggal siya. So, during the pandemic, it's really easy for you guys to find your seeds. I mean, hindi mo naman kailangan bumili lagi ng buto. What you just need to know is how to properly harvest your seeds from your leftover vegetables. So again, first, the space. Pangalawa is the seeds. And I think, isa to sa mga magagandang sample na we can actually explore. Kung hindi ka pa ready magtanim, at least you can now explore in harvesting seeds para if ever na ready ka na mag-start ng planting journey mo, meron ka ng buto.
So after ng space ng seeds, punta naman tayo sa soil. Alright? So, generally speaking, we have three kinds of soil. First is the clayish. Second is the sandy. And of course, yung last, yung loamy. Yung difference of which is, again, I don't want to be too technical about the nutrient content. Ang pinaka-importante na kailangan nating maintindihan is yung water retention of different kinds of soil. Why? Why is it important na alam natin kung ano yung water holding capacity on different kinds of soil? Because different plants would actually require different kinds of soil for the root system to thrive. So just to give you an example, yung sandy kind of soil is basically yung tipo ng lupa na mabilis bumagsak yung tubig. So pag diniligan natin siya, mabilis mapuno ng tubig yung soil, pero mabilis din mawala yung tubig from the soil. Yung clayish naman, ito yung medyo mas matigas. Once we pour water into it, mas mabagal bumaba yung tubig, mas mabagal masaturate yung tubig dun sa soil, and at the same time, mas matagal mawala yung water from the soil. So just to give you an idea, yung different kinds ng plants na pwede nating mapalaki, say for example, for a sandy, is mostly yung mga herb kind of plants. Like say for example, lavender, like say for example, rosemary. The reason why yun yung mga plants na pwede natin ilagay sa sandy is because mas na-enjoy nung root system nila or nung plant itself na medyo mas tuyo yung soil kung saan sila nakatanim. Yung clay naman is usually yung mga fast-growing na vegetables natin. So for example, lettuce, we can talk about cabbage, also broccoli. The reason why mas gusto naman nila yung clayish kind of soil is because mas na-enjoy nila ng maraming tubig. Say for example, for cabbage, since mabilis mo lang siyang i-grow, mas kailangan niya ng maraming water reserve dun sa soil niya. And clay usually holds water for the longest time versus a sandy kind of soil. Now, for the loam naman, and usually pag tinatanong natin yung mga tao, ano ba sa tingin yung pinakamagandang soil, they'd usually go for loam. And which is true naman, because loam is actually somewhere in between ng sandy and then ng clayish type of soil. Ang mga pwede nating itanim, generally speaking, lahat ng may pinipitas or may fruits usually ang kailangan nun is loamy kind of soil. Now, usually, pag pumunta tayo sa garden natin, meron tayong garden beds, makakakita tayo ng different kinds of soil. So, meron lang akong dalawang sample ng soil para at least makita nyo yung difference. Yung difference between a good kind of soil is usually yung mabato. So, marami kayong makikitang buo-buo, mabato, and this is actually not a good kind of soil. What you can do to improve your soil na nakikita natin is probably remove the clumps. And kung nakikita nyo mabato siya, maybe you can mix it with other materials. So, for example, mga nabubulok nating vegetables or leaves, or kung meron kayong source na napagbibilan natin na mas magandang kind of soil, pwede natin i-mix. Pero ideally speaking, ito yung dalawang different kind of soil. Ang pinakamaganda is yung medyo mas okay siya. Or hindi siya masyadong mabato. Or hindi rin masyadong malupa. This is also important when we talk about growing our food sa potted plants, which I will be discussing later. So there, just a quick rundown dun sa soil natin. We have 3 different kinds of soil. Basically, ang mas gusto lang natin maintindihan is how they hold water and kung ano yung mga klase ng halaman na pwede nating palakihin. And again, if you stumble upon a bad looking soil, there are many ways that in which we can actually improve this para magmukha siyang good kind of soil. So that's basically it. When we talk about soil, it's just really trying to understand kung ano yung mga klaseng halaman na pwede nating itanim. It doesn't necessarily mean na pag clayish yung soil natin, wala na tayong pwedeng mapalaki. As a matter of fact, maraming vegetables na nag-e-enjoy or nagtathrive better sa clayish kind of soil. Or pag sinabi natin masyadong sandy or mabuhangin yung lupa natin, ang impulse ng utak natin is wala na tayong pwedeng itanim doon. Again, different kinds of soil can actually make different kinds of vegetables or plants thrive. So it's just knowing the right vegetables wherein to grow dun sa mga soil na meron kayo. Again, as a general rule, loam is the best. Pero kung wala naman, yun nga, pwede mong isipin kung ano yung pwede mong itanim given the situation or given the soil na meron ka sa bahay ninyo. For the sunlight, ito minsan naman yung mas nahihirapan mag-consider yung mga tao when we're trying to grow. Like say for example, if you're living in a condominium, you have a windowsill, ang next question dun is, paano ko malalaman kung enough yung sunlight na nakukuha yung windowsill ko to say for example, grow a vegetable like a tomato? As a general metric or rule, meron tayong 3 kinds of sun exposure. Number 1 is the full sun. This is basically a spot or kung kunyari yung lugar kung saan ka magtatanim, itong lamesa na meron ako, and it receives 6 hours na direct sunlight, you are blessed because basically full sun exposure yung meron ka. And pagka full sun yung meron ka, it will give you the widest variety of plants that you can actually plant. As a general rule, lahat na may pinipitas, say for example, eggplants, tomatoes, ampalaya, or your favorite vegetables, particularly ornamentals like sunflower, they would definitely require full sun exposure. Again, 6 hours or more. Yung partially shaded naman, again, looking at this table, pagka nakaka-receive lang siya ng 3 to 6 hours na sunlight exposure, that's basically a partially shaded area. And for partially shaded area, yung mga pwede nating itanim, medyo mas kumukonti. So kung yung full sun exposure na area, it will give you a wide variety of plants to choose from. When we try to look at a partially shaded area, medyo mas lumiliit and medyo restricted lang tayo sa mga small plants. Like say for example, herbs. Herbs like basil can actually thrive in the partially shaded areas. And other herbs, particularly mint and whatnot. So medyo mas maliliit lang yung pwede nating itanim. And then yung spot naman, yung last na sun exposure natin is shaded areas. These are spaces wherein nakakatanggap lang sila ng 3 hours or less. Medyo mas konti talaga yung pwede nating itanim. And usually, restricted lang tayo sa root crops. On top of my head, ang pinaka-example is potatoes. Since those crops, usually lumalaki sila sa ilalim ng lupa. So, ang pinaka-issue natin ngayon, lalo na kung nasa condominium ka and you're watching this from your home in a condominium and wala kang masyadong sun exposure, usually ang inisip ng mga tao, wala na akong chance to grow something. And ang maganda ngayon with our generation, it's actually cheap for us to fix that lighting problem. If we're gonna talk about lighting and urban gardening, say for example, 6 years ago, medyo mas mahihirapan and pagka wala kang sun, medyo walang chance for you to grow something other than, say, for example, potatoes or mushrooms. But we're blessed to have very cheap growing lights. Again, you can check yung mga online grocery shops natin, and a particular growing light can actually set you back for only 600 pesos or 300 pesos per growing light. And that growing light can actually enable you to grow yung mga favorite mong vegetables, say for example, yung tomatoes, at the very least, wag na masyado yung ampalaya kasi medyo creeper sila. But point of the matter is, if you have limited sunlight exposure, you can actually fix that with just a fraction of a cost. Because 3 or 4 years ago, a simple grow light can actually set you back for almost 2,000 pesos. So masyado nang mura ngayon, and it opens more doors of opportunities for people who are very much willing to start growing pero wala masyadong access to sunlight. So there, that's basically the consideration. 3 kinds of sun exposure, and if you don't have sun exposure in your house or in your condominium, you can definitely check your online grocery websites and then try to purchase your grow lights. And now we go to watering. And usually, a misconception ng tao, the more you water, the more chances of winning, which is actually wrong. Mas madali kang makakapatay ng halaman if you overwater them versus hindi mo siya masyadong nadidiligan. As a general rule, ang recommended namin is you water your plants twice a day, first in the morning and bago magdilim. And then the idea behind watering, and usually nakakalimutan ng tao, is when we water, we want it to partially dry up or medyo matuyo ng konti bago natin siyang diligan ulit. We strongly discourage people in watering their plants pagkatanghaling tapat, dahil usually, tanghaling tapatin yung pinakamainit na point ng araw natin. And pag binasa natin yung halaman or diniligan natin sila, usually medyo nalalanta sila. This is what we call plant shock. Kasi sobrang init ng panahon and then we douse it with water, medyo nagugulat yung sistema ng halaman. That's the reason why yung iba nagtataka bakit kinabukasan parang nalanta na or parang matamlay na yung mga halaman nila. So again, as a general rule, morning and bago maggabi. And isa pa sa mga nakakalimutan ng mga tao, when they try to water their plants, yung iba natatakot kasi nadiligan yung mga halaman. When you try to water your plants, i-demo ko siguro para mas maganda. When you try to water your plants, don't be afraid na medyo marami kang malalagay na tubig. The idea behind here is, masaturate natin yung lupa ng tubig. So, ang pinakamagandang technique na pwede natin gawin is when we try to water our plants, be sure na may tumutulong tubig sa ilalim ng paso natin. And it's really important na paabutin natin hanggang dun sa ilalim, lalo na kung medyo malaki na yung halaman natin. Kasi yung iba natatakot magdilig, usually nilalagyan lang nila ng isang cup ng tubig, hindi umaabot hanggang ilalim yung tubig. So, minsan, kala nila, maganda yung pagkakadilig nila, pero ang totoo nun, hindi siya umaabot sa ilalim. So what we want is to make sure na saturated yung lupa ng tubig. Yung twice a day namin na recommended watering is of course, generally speaking yon. Pero sa totoo niyan, different kinds of plants would actually require different watering frequencies. Like say for example, yung mga halaman na nasa loob ng bahay natin, particularly ornamentals, minsan kailangan lang natin silang diligan ng once or twice a week. Again, it greatly depends kung ano yung tinatanim ninyo and kung saan nakalagay yung halaman. Pero again, as a general rule, twice a day, a morning and then in the evening. Isa pang pwede natin gawin, maliban sa tinitignan natin yung pots kung basa or hindi, we can actually use our senses. In this case, sense of touch. Pwede natin gamitin yung finger natin, and then we can just poke or itusok natin dun sa lupa. And then kung medyo basa pa siya 1 inch from the surface, wag na muna tayo magdilig. Pero if it's dry or medyo pag-angat natin ng daliri natin is wala masyado nakadikit na lupa or tuyo, that's the perfect time for us to water it. Again, we strongly discourage people from overwatering. Hindi po siya mas marami kang dinilig, mas marami kang makukuhang prutas, or mas magandang halaman. It's really trying to understand your plant. Tignan natin kung medyo basa pa yung soil, gamitin natin yung kamay natin, tignan natin yung plant kung medyo nalalanta na, maybe that's the perfect time for us to water it. Again, when watering our plants, just use your senses and try to connect with your plants. And now we go to our last point of discussion, which is container. And ang nakakatawa, pag nagagawa kami or nagkakondak kami ng urban gardening training or seminar, pagdating sa container, nag-aalisa na yung mga tao. And they don't think na it's as equal important as seeds, sunlight, watering, and whatnots. And I'll explain to you why. Basically, the container will hold the soil for us. And the water should be kept or held by the soil. Minsan kasi ang iniisip ng mga tao, the container should hold the water for the plants, which is wrong. Ang pinaka-basic for us to spot a good container from not, or good pot from not, is if they are properly draining. Bakit kailangan ng butas ng mga containers or ng mga pots natin? Because again, from the start of this video series, we always reiterate na when we do urban gardening, we want to mimic kung paano pinapalaki yung mga halaman natin in their natural habitat. And when we're trying to grow vegetables, here for example, in a farm, usually wala naman silang container. And it's usually in a open field or open farm wherein yung excess water would just go deep down doon sa lupa. And we don't have that when when we're growing our food from containers. So that's the very reason why it's really important for us to check kung properly draining yung mga pots natin. Why? Pagka may tubig na naiiwan dun sa paso, it usually causes a lot of problems. And one in particular is root rot, kung saan nabubulok yung root system ng mga halaman natin kasi hindi naman sila designed to thrive nung masyadong basa or may excess water doon sa paso nila. So that's one. A container should properly hold the soil, not the water for our plants. Pangalawa, usually nagpapalaki ng halaman yung mga tao, and then they try to parang explore na pwede ba tayo magpalaki ng halaman, say for example, a tomato in a small plant pot like this. The answer is no. It's really important for you to understand kung gaano kalaki-lalaki yung halaman ninyo. Katulad nitong hawak ko, it's a tomato. It's okay for you to start growing your tomato sa mga maliliit na pots like this, but eventually, pag lumaki siya, kailangan mo na siyang i-transfer to a bigger pot. Not because mas magandang tignan yung mas malaking pots, but medyo matalino kasi yung mga halaman natin. And once they start growing, and then tumatama na yung root system nila ron sa walls ng container natin, it actually signals the plant to stop growing. Bakit? Kasi sinasabi ng halaman na okay, na-reach na pala natin yung maximum capacity ng bahay natin. Kung tumaas pa tayo or kung lumaki pa tayo, it's either tutumba na tayo or masisira na natin yung bahay natin. So they're actually wise. That's the very reason why yung iba nagtatanim ng mga tomato in a small pot and they'd be wondering bakit hindi na siya lumalaki, parang nabubonsai na siya, or minsan lalaki siya pero hindi na siya nagbe-bear ng fruits. It's basically because hindi nila nilalagay sa proper size ng container. And as a general rule, for a full-grown vegetables, kailangan, if this is your seedling pot, kailangan mo siyang i-transfer to a bigger pot, mga 3 times or 4 times bigger than this one. Again, it will allow the plants to have or to develop a better root system para mas makakuha siya ng maraming nutrients and eventually makapag-bear siya ng fruit. Just to give you an example, a tomato cannot thrive in a small pot like this one. It will rather thrive in a bigger pot like this. Alright? So other than the size, I know it's pandemic, so medyo mas mahihirapan tayo to source out beautiful looking pots like this or a decent pot like this. You can actually recycle kung ano yung mga nagagamit ninyo. For seedling pots or yung mga starting pots natin, pwede kayong gumamit ng used out cup noodles. Pero it's really important for you to poke holes again sa ilalim. Because again, this is a plastic. Pag may excess water, it will sit and mabubulok yung root system ninyo. You can also explore yung mga cola bottles natin. What you can do is you cut it in half. It's either lengthwise or pwedeng nakahiga and then bubuksan natin yung container. That will make it a bigger pot. Pero ang pinaka-importante ron, depende kung ano yung orientation na ginamit nyo, make sure na properly draining yung pots. May buta siya sa ilalim. Because again, kung wala, most often than not, it will cause a lot of problems for your plants. And not only that, you can also explore yung mga coconut husk pots like this. These are 100% natural pots. Ang kagandahan sa mga ganitong pots is eventually, if lumaki sila, like say for example, this particular basil, lalaki pa to. And when we try to transplant them, ang ginagawa kasi ng iba, lalo na pagka nagpalaki tayo sa ganitong plastic, kukunin natin yung halaman and then ita-transfer natin. And that usually stresses out the plants. And that is solved pag gumagamit tayo ng mga biodegradable pots like coconut husk pots. When we try to transfer it to a bigger pot, like say for example itong basil, and then we try to transfer it to a bigger pot, ang gagawin lang natin is just transfer the entire thing. Ang kagandahan sa mga ganitong recyclable pots or yung mga natural pots is eventually mabubulok na lang siya and it will act as a fertilizer for the plants. So, ang daming benefits when we're trying to use this. But suma total, when we're talking about container, it really is very important for us. Because minsan, it will determine between a healthy-looking plant like a basil and a tomato na merong prutas and a tomato na walang prutas. So again, don't overdo it naman. Kasi minsan, yung mga maliliit na plants like basil, sabi nila, baka kailangan na mas malaking pots. Ilalagay naman nila sa humongous pots. It's a total waste of space. Again, when you're trying to explore your planting journey, it involves a lot of research. Dapat pag nagtatanim ka ng something like, say for example, basil, alam mo kung ano yung itsura niya pag lumaki siya. In that way, you can plan what container to use, what container to transfer them to. But again, at the end of the day, it's really important for you to spot a pot na ginagamit for growing and a pot na ginagamit for display. For ceramic pots na walang butas, that is basically a pot for displaying, you'd be needing an actual pot inside them. Pero yung mga paso katulad nito, na naturally draining, o yung mga paso na merong butas sa ilalim, you can actually use them to start growing your plants. So again, that's basically it. In terms of container, it's equally as important as your seeds and your soil and your sunlight. So you have to be wise in choosing what material to use. And at the same time, you can explore possibilities and be creative in upcycling and recycling materials from your home. So that's about it.
So, ganun lang pala kadali yun, Carlo.
Exactly, Yvette. Kaya nga sinabi ko kanina, when we started the video, ang daming taong natatakot to start their planting journey. Pero it's so easy. Naalala mo ba?
Yes, okay, there are 6.
Okay, sige.
Sige, soil, water, sunlight, container, seeds,
And space. See, naalala mo pa. So it's just as easy as that. You just have to remember yung mga basics na natutunan natin kanina dun sa videos. And I'm sure eventually you can start harvesting and cooking your own vegetables at home.
Importante yun.
Yun talaga, yun yung masarap na part ng pagtatanim is
Yeah.
the actual cooking and eating of our vegetables.
Yes. Thank you very much, Carlo. You want to tell them where they can contact you?
Oh yes, if you guys are very interested or curious kung ano ginagawa namin sa Manila Grow Kids and how we change perspective of the young ones, you can visit our social media accounts. Instagram, of course, it's at MNL Grow Kids. Since millennial tayo, wala na tayong vowels. It's MNL Grow Kids. You can also check all our products from our website at www.manilagrowkids.com. You can check yung lineup ng seeds namin. And of course, there are a lot of resources that you can read in order for you to be guided accordingly kahit nasa ang stage na kayo ng planting journey ninyo. Yvette.
Thank you, Carlo. And also, if you want more information on planting tips or inspirational stories on people who have made it in agriculture, you can check out agriculture.com.ph or join Agriculture Online on Facebook. And guys, if you have any questions, you can post them at the comment section below of this video, and the agriculturist from the ATI will assist you with your queries. And you can also show us your greenery at home and get a chance to win exciting prizes. So what are you waiting for? By the way, guys, we'll see you again next week on the next episode of
Agri Talk.